Let me thank all of you for coming out this afternoon. I think we're going to have an interesting town meeting, and I want to thank Suzanne Costello for joining us, and she's going to be speaking in a moment, and Paige Olmec will be speaking, and George Horton as well. Let me tell you what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about why in the United States of America we have more income and wealth inequality today than at any time since the 1920s. Okay? We're here to talk about why 3 people in America own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. We're here to talk about why in the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. You all know what that means? I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. A lot of folks don't appreciate that, but that means if your kid gets sick, you worry about whether you can afford to take that kid to the doctor. If your car breaks down and you need $500 in repair, you don't quite know where you're going to get that money. And if you don't get your car fixed, you can't get to work, you can't get to work, you don't get a paycheck, you don't get a paycheck, you're not feeding your kids. What this discussion is about is asking why the United States of America is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. All right? A human right, not a privilege. I live in Burlington, Vermont. We'd love you all to come up and visit us sometime. 50 miles north of me is Canada. And in Canada, everybody has the right to go to a doctor, any doctor they want. And if somebody ends up in the hospital with a major procedure, maybe you have a heart transplant, maybe you're going for cancer therapy. Anybody here know how much the bill is when you leave that hospital? Anyone know? It's zero. You don't pay a nickel. And yet in this country, we are spending twice as much per person on health care as do the Canadians or the Europeans. And yet 87 million people, including some in this room, are either uninsured completely or underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments. And we lose 30,000 people every year who die unnecessarily because they don't get to a doctor when they should. And you want to hear something that I think is even crazier than that? And that is that some 500,000 people in our country go bankrupt because of medical bills. Can you imagine that somebody gets diagnosed with cancer and they have an extensive chemotherapy or whatever form of therapy they have, and they got to worry about getting well, and yet in the back of their mind is, how in God's name am I going to pay that $100,000 bill? And they can't pay it, and then they go into financial ruin. For what reason? They were diagnosed with cancer. How cruel, how horrific is that? And that is why, as president, we are going to implement a Medicare for all single-payer program guaranteeing health care to all people without any premiums, without any co-payments, without any deductibles, and without any out-of-pocket expenses. That's called civilized, humane health care. That's what we will implement. And because the American people are sick and tired of the greed and corruption of the corporate elite who have no allegiance to anybody except their bottom line. And if they can make 5 cents more by shutting down a factory in this community or the next community and move to China, not a problem. And that is why we are going to change our trade policies. That is why we are going to give workers power on board of directors. So it's not just a board of Wall Street executives who determine whether jobs stay in America or not, or whether workers get decent wages, or whether they do stock buybacks and cut back on worker health care. Workers will be on the board. Workers will get 20% of the stock issued by those companies. In other words, we need to give working people in this country more power over their own lives. And that's what we intend to do. And when we talk about the future of America, we talk about education. The world has changed from where it was 50 years ago. And it seems to me that when we talk about public education, K through 12 is not good enough anymore. We've got to make sure that every young person in this country, regardless of his or her income, is able to get a higher education, which is why we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free, and why we're going to cancel all student debt in this country. And when we talk about jobs, we're talking about decent paying jobs. I've gone around your beautiful state, and I've talked to too many workers. I remember a woman in Des Moines last week, a couple of weeks ago, raising 3 kids on $10 an hour working at Burger King, I think. Well, you know what? You can't raise anybody. You can't take care of yourself on $10 an hour. We've got to raise that minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour, and provide equal pay for equal work for women. And we're going to talk about more of this stuff in a moment after we hear from our panelists. But I also wanted to tell you that Donald Trump is wrong a lot of the times. Donald Trump is wrong almost all of the times, but Donald Trump is especially wrong when he thinks that climate change is a hoax. All right. Climate change is not a hoax. Climate change is the greatest threat facing not only our country, but the entire planet. And that is why I have introduced the most comprehensive climate change legislation ever introduced by any candidate running for federal office. We are doing what the scientists tell us we have to do, and that is as rapidly as humanly possible. We're going to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I want to congratulate the people of Iowa. You are already one of the leaders in this country in terms of wind power. You're getting about 35%. 1/3 of your electricity now comes from wind. As president, we are going to substantially, underline substantially, increase funding for sustainable energy like wind, like solar, like geothermal. We're going to invest in new research and development for new technologies. And instead of denying the reality of climate change, we're going to lead the world, because this is a global issue, in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel. And when we do that, we're going to create up to 20 million good-paying jobs, including a lot of good jobs right here in Iowa. So, for the sake of our children and future generations, this is an issue that we must address. All right, with that, let me now introduce Suzanne Costello. Suzanne is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. She taught economics at a local Iowa community college before becoming a cattle farmer in Jasper County. Suzanne, you can stand up, you can sit, whatever you're comfortable. Sitting or standing, whatever works for you.
Does it come off? I guess it's the teacher in me. Yes, for the past 13 years, I've farmed full-time with my husband, and we raise livestock. We raise beef, pork, lamb, and chicken. We raise the crops to feed them, and we also sell grain off the farm. That also means that we're independently insured because neither one of us has a job in town. And I hadn't meant to go through this, but I have to say people are afraid of turning healthcare over to the government. But we did a happy dance when my husband turned 65 because it halved our costs. And
Because you got Medicare.
yes,
Right.
because now one of us has Medicare. So, and I have to say that before the ACA, it was even worse on individual markets. And I was denied by my husband's insurance. And we found out we were pregnant at the same time. And there wasn't a single company that would take me, except for they put a 10-month rider on maternity benefits, like it was an a la carte experience. And I COBRA'd myself at big expense, because if you have a farm, that is your asset. And if our son had been in the NICU, that would mean perhaps that we'd lose the farm. And, you know, these kind of medical questions are also big for on into life. I've watched both of my parents age and die, and my dad had, it wasn't Alzheimer's, but it was a dementia, and both my parents thought they had put money aside, but I don't know how you put enough money aside for 5 years of dementia care. And I don't know how, on top of that, when your mother has multiple medical conditions, you have another 5 years of medical bills. And it's very stressful to watch that kind of thing happen. And it's even worse when you know that you're trading off paying a living wage to the worker who's taking care of your mother, and you don't want to stint that worker, but you also know that you want to pay to have your mother's medical needs that are beyond the care that you can provide as a family member. And I have a sister who's diabetic. And my sister was the point person for my mother's care. And she looked at that and she says, but we don't have any laws protecting us from who will take care of you for long-term medical insurance. That's an unregulated market. So that's just wide open. That never got touched. And those are the kinds of things that, you know, we talk about, that entrepreneurialism is the, you know, is going to be the engine that runs this company. How are you going to be an entrepreneur if that puts all the medical benefits on you to provide? And all those GM workers, I heard the stories about how they needed those benefits because after 30 years, their bodies were worn out. Well, I can tell you, I worked for the post office, and they made it at the post office so that repetitive injuries were not their fault. You know what they did? So they took away the carts, and they made you wear the shoulder bags. And now they have repetitive injuries on your shoulder, and your knee, and your hip. That shouldn't be. And if we hadn't had to bargain for those benefits, we could have bargained for wages and working conditions. And so how are we going to be competitive with Volvo or BMW or any of those countries that have the insurance paid for by the government? We can't be. So that's why, so I got a little off topic.
No, you're doing great. Look, anytime we talk about what happens to ordinary people, you're not off topic. Everybody in here knows what you're talking about because it impacts and applies to families here in this room, all over the state and all over this country. Everybody knows somebody who, when they get old, you know, has some serious injury or serious health hazard. And how do you come up with the funding to take care of that person? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is why, among other things, we need a healthcare system not designed just to make $100 billion in profits last year for the drug companies and the insurance companies. We need a healthcare system designed to provide quality care to all people. So, Suzanne, thank you very much. Let me introduce Paige Olmec, who is a senior at Grinnell College, and sounds like you're doing a whole lot of interesting things. Thanks so much for being here, Paige.
Thank you, Senator. So hi, my name is Paige Olmec. As Bernie said, I'm a senior at Grinnell College. I'm majoring in English and philosophy. And I was raised in Iowa, just north of Council Bluffs, on a farm where my neighbors are affected by the flooding in the Missouri River that happened this spring, that y'all are aware of. I'm excited to be a part of this panel with Senator Sanders and with my friends here, because one reason is this will actually be my first presidential caucus that I'll get to participate in. There are many candidates running, but there's only one who understands the importance of movement politics over business as usual politics. So who I am is I am an organizer and executive board member of the Union of Grinnell Student Dining Workers. So 20 miles down the road in Grinnell, Iowa, at Grinnell College, in 2016, students fought to form the first independent undergraduate labor union. So that fall in 2016, we organized students who worked in the dining hall and then later secured our first contract. And this is my first semester of college down the road. So that year, the union was successful in raising the wages for dining hall workers, who are the most vulnerable population of student workers on our campus, from $8.50 to $9.50 an hour. Now, rather being satiated or satisfied from these successes, they instead functioned as a catalyst to show us a greater goal, which was to organize all student workers on Grinnell's campus. So last fall, and we knocked on every door on campus and began to see our work more as a as movement politics and as building a movement. However, the college recognized the threat of students understanding themselves as workers and would not meet us at the bargaining table. Now, in this fight, we went on to win our election on a 5-1 margin. Students at Grinnell wanted a union. But we were organizing in precarious territory. The college and their corporate law firm were able to utilize the threat of sending our case to the Trump's National Labor Relations Board, which would allow them to overturn a 2016 precedent that stated that students are workers, that workers at Columbia University fought for. So instead of putting all efforts of student organizing in jeopardy by pushing our case forward, we instead decided to take our work away from the legal sphere and withdraw our case for now for representing all student workers. Which led me to a kind of devastating question of, if we can't win on anybody in this room on a campus like Grinnell College, really liberal school, where can we win, right? If organizing a union on this campus is so difficult, I can only imagine what workers at other corporations, especially workers at corporations and workers around the world have to go through when they want to organize a union. Everyone in this country should have the right to join or form a union and have their employers negotiate in good faith. And this isn't the case today, but you better believe it'll be the case under Bernie Sanders' presidency. So Bernie's Workplace Democracy Act is going to protect the wins that unions have fought for decades, and that we at Grinnell have fought for since 2016, and to understand ourselves and student workers as workers, gig economy workers as workers, domestic workers as workers, care workers as workers. And I'm proud to share the stage with Senator Sanders, the next President of the United States, who will hold the title of Organizer-in-Chief.
Paige, let me understand, how much other student workers making at Grinnell?
So I make, depending on my job, I think $8.50 an hour. That ain't right.
That ain't right. So we're going to give you a union, and we're going to give you a minimum wage of $15 an hour, which is what I think you deserve.
And a $2 billion institution can do that.
Yes.
Sure, it can provide that.
George Horton is a self-described, correct me if I'm wrong, Harry Truman Yellow Dog Democrat. Is that who you are? All right. George served in the Marine Corps. We thank you very much for your service. Just as his dad served in World War II, George was a labor leader during his 25 years working for the old Chicago Northwestern and 5 years with Union Pacific as a foreman. George, thanks so much for being with us.
Now that about sums it up. I'm from the little town of Vining up and over the hill here ways, here in Tama County. And I served with the Marine Corps, 1st Marine Corps Division. We were the first ones to go through the, I was on the U.S. Point Defiance. We went through the Panama Canal and ran out the 150 Soviet missiles that were in Cuba. Those people don't like us, and we shouldn't like them. And I worked many, many different union jobs over the years. Spent a few years at Alcoa Aluminum. And it's the only voice a person has in a plant, in an industrial plant. And Bernie's really been hitting that really good, that we got to save our unions so everybody could have a voice. And those years on the railroad, on the old Northwestern, that was more or less a ma and pa operation. Once the Union Pacific took us over, they had a chairman of the board called Dick Cheney. You might have remembered his name. And he immediately destroyed, once the Union Pacific took over the Northwestern, they immediately destroyed the 150-year-old labor unions we had out there. We had to start all over again. And I sure do back our man that's going to be our 46th president down there. You know. I'll see what's on page 2 here if I can get it opened up. I'd stand up, but I guess I need my glasses. Yeah. Yeah, Bernie has fought for the decency of all people. And no human being is illegal. And we must protect DACA in a big way. And I think Preston will even agree with me on this, that when the Marine Corps always needed help, we'd always dipped out into Mexico and bring the boys up. And some of them couldn't even handle English. But once we gave them a Hispanic drill instructor and taught them that a mortar round would go a length of a soccer field, they would understand, yeah. And climate change is real. And our little Gertrude Thornburg, Gertrude, that we had protesting and doing the march there in Iowa City, you know who brought her into Iowa City? Yeah, Bernie. Unions make America stronger. Right to work laws have to end. And we've got to protect all workers of all kinds. And Bernie cares about uplifting everybody, regardless of any kind of a background. And just basically, Bernie knows, and we all know, we must do better. We've got to get rid of this man in the White House. Okay, that's why I'm supporting Bernie.
George, thank you very much for your service to our country, and thanks so much for being here. What I'd like to do, we'll open it up for your questions and your comments, but I'd like to ask you some questions, and you can ask me some questions. I want to talk about picking up where Suzanne began. What about healthcare? Should healthcare in America, and don't tell me what I want to hear, I want you to think about it. Should healthcare be a human right? Yes. Okay, why? Who wants to tell me why? Don't be shy. Why should healthcare be a human right? There is a mentality out there that says Hey, you got the money to make a little money, you got great health care. You don't have the money, so what? That's it. That's the way life is. That true? Is that accurate? All right. Should good quality health care just be available for those people who have the money? No. All right. Why not? Help me out here. Why is health care a human right, if that's what you believe? Come on, don't be shy here, guys. All right, stand up. Stand up. What's your name?
Michelle.
Michelle?
Yes, I mean, healthcare should be a human right.
Healthcare should be a human right because we're humans.
Everybody gets sick.
Okay, everybody gets sick. We are human beings. What else about healthcare? People hurt by the current healthcare system? Who wants to tell me about that? I see a hand going over there. I am told by my colleagues in Congress that we have the best healthcare system in the world. Everybody loves their private health insurance companies. Is that true? No. All right, let me hold that mic close to your mouth. What's your name?
So my name is Kelly McCreary. I'm a nurse, so I work
All right.
in healthcare. And I happen to be lucky because I do have a good insurance. You know, I work for the state of Iowa. I have good insurance. But I don't think that healthcare should be able to be profitable. That's what I don't like. I don't like with the cost. I had my son was in the hospital last year, and his hospital bill was $65,000. So I'm, like I said, very lucky that I have insurance, and that was just the hospital stay.
Did your son's illness? Did you have to pay a lot, or is it all covered by insurance?
I had to pay $600 out-of-pocket expense.
Okay.
And then this and that and that and this, and you know, I mean, it added up. Anyway, so you know, I mean, it shouldn't be a It shouldn't be a for-profit. You know,
Right.
I don't understand how insulin. I've been a nurse for a long time. How insulin has gone up to be unaffordable anymore as a life-sustaining.
Good. Your first name is?
Kelly.
Kelly, right. All right, what Kelly is saying, so all think about it. There are drugs like insulin that people desperately need to stay alive. Insulin is oxygen for people who have diabetes. They need it to stay alive. I don't know if Kelly knows this, but one quarter of the people with diabetes in America ration their insulin. You know that? And when you ration insulin, you get sick. Sometimes you die. You get sicker, and you sometimes die. Why do we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Why do senior citizens in Iowa and in Vermont sometimes cut their medicine, their pills in half? Why is that? Yep, ma'am, stand up.
We have no negotiating power.
Good.
The United States has no negotiating power, whereas places like Canada, they can negotiate the drug prices. So without that power, we are essentially losing the battle.
You got it. That's the answer in a nutshell. And you know how it happens that the government does not negotiate prices with the drug companies? I think it has something to do with the fact that over the last 20 years, the drug companies have spent billions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions. I don't know, anybody here see the ads that are on television now telling you how terrible Medicare for All is? All right, you know who's paying for those ads? Drug companies and the insurance companies. They don't like the idea, as this young lady said, that we're going to negotiate prices like they do in Canada and every other country on earth. They don't like the idea that under Medicare for All, nobody will pay more than $200 a year for the prescription drugs they need. How's that? A little bit of an improvement over what we got right now. They don't like the idea that we'll no longer allow 6 drug companies to make $69 billion in profit, while 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine they need. And they will spend unlimited amounts of money trying to defeat Medicare for All, because under Medicare for All, we surely will sit down with them and end their ability to charge us any prices they want. All right, what else does the healthcare system do? Talk about it, whatever's on your mind. I want to stay on healthcare, we'll go elsewhere. Yeah.
They control, the insurance companies control, people are worried about government controlling how their health care is. The
Do you run into that as a nurse?
And it is, the government is not there to make a profit off of us. So now we have insurance companies deciding when and when I cannot have an MRI for a broken foot.
Do you run into that as a nurse, seeing the power of insurance companies impacting the treatment?
No, because I work my job.
Oh, your job's okay.
Different job, but yeah.
All right, other words,
No.
another word on healthcare. Anyone want to add to this discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in 2013, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had health care at the time where the deductible was $5,000. Then they took care of everything else.
So you paid the first $5,000 and they
Yeah,
paid the rest.
But if it weren't for Obamacare after that, I've had cancer twice since then on chemo. And last time I've been on Medicare, so that took care of that. But before that I wasn't on Medicare, but because of Obamacare, they couldn't get rid of me off of health care. And the health care was able to take care of that.
So your fear was that if we didn't have protections for people with pre-existing conditions,
Yes.
you would not have been able to maintain your insurance.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. Other thoughts on healthcare? Anything people want to? I see a gentleman right there, sir. See, the mic is coming. Stand up if you can, please.
Yes, I'm Suzanne's husband. When we found out, we tried to talk to our healthcare, to Blue Cross. Why are you not allowing us for her to join my policy? Talking to the government is easy compared to talking to the healthcare. They just ignore you. They have no reason.
Well, they do have a reason, don't they?
It's money, you cannot talk to anyone that will give you an answer as why. They just say you're denied, and that's it.
Well, that's the function. Every denial is more profit, right? If I deny you and I'm an insurance company, I make more money. That is their reason. That's what they do. I mean, that is the logic of the current system if you design the system to make money rather than provide care. Okay, other thoughts on healthcare, sir?
Yes. There is going to be a large amount of people retiring in 5 years.
Yep.
It's going to be a 25% increase. One of the things we have a shortage of is caregivers.
That's right.
Colleges right now cannot ramp up fast enough to get enough nurses in.
Right.
In Europe, they actually pay students to go to school to be nurses.
Right.
We might need something like that. The students, even if they have all of their tuition paid, they still need to live, and they need to not be working. They need to concentrate on going to school, especially in a field like nursing, where they have to know enough not to kill people later.
Paige agrees, is that right?
Yeah.
All right. All right, you raise an interesting question in terms of healthcare, but it goes beyond healthcare. We have, one of the reasons that we are proposing what we call a federal guarantees job program. That means we make a job available to anybody who has the ability to work, is because we have an enormous amount of work to do in this country, all right? Let's roll up our sleeves and let's do the work. You're quite right. In America, how could it be that we don't have enough nurses? We are importing nurses from the Philippines and other countries and draining their healthcare systems because we are not educating enough nurses. Seems to me nursing is a good job. We got to respect nurses who are the backbone of our healthcare system, pay them well, and make sure that we have young people going into nursing. But it is not only nursing, it is dental care. Do we have dentists who are in rural areas in America providing affordable dental care to our people? No, we don't. Do we have enough doctors in rural areas in America and in urban areas in America? No, we don't. Do we have quality child care, well-trained, well-paid child care workers? No, we don't. Do we attract the best and the brightest to go into teaching, which is an enormously important area if we are going to have a strong economy and a great country? No, we don't. Do we have enough workers available for an aging society? Your point. We pay home health care workers starvation wages. So what this campaign is about is changing the priorities of America, honoring work and the people who do the really important work. Hedge fund managers do not do the important work in America. Healthcare workers and childcare workers and teachers do the important work. And we want to do is change the value system to say to the kids at Grinnell and elsewhere, we need you to be doctors and nurses and childcare workers and teachers and police officers and firefighters and EMT people. We need to have that kind of workforce. There are millions of jobs out there, not to mention rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. How about when people turn on their water faucet, they get clean drinking water? Not a radical idea. We need workers to make that happen. We need workers to move us to sustainable energy and energy efficiency. Many millions of good-paying jobs out there. And that's what this campaign is about. That's what the political revolution is about. It's creating jobs that make this country stronger and better. Okay, your turn. Ask me a question. Yes, ma'am, way in the back. Yeah, woman in the black sweatshirt. Yeah.
I was just going to make a comment.
Yeah, you got a mic right behind you, ma'am.
Behind you.
Ma'am?
I was just going to make a comment. I have a daughter that's a teacher, and she's very happy in that profession, and she's doing a good job. She doesn't complain about her wages, but I don't think we pay our teachers enough, and we expect too much from our teachers because they are now doing things that mom and dad should have been doing from the time those children were born at home. Teaching them manners, teaching them how to stay clean, and so forth and so on. Oh, I'm sorry. I talk with my hands. I'm sorry. But I think that's only part of it. I think that another part of it is we have got to go back and look at the honor of doing a good, hard day's work with your hands. Not everybody is going to go to a four-year college and have a sparkling degree when they get out. Some people are more geared to working with their hands. We need plumbers, electricians, garbage men, all of those things. And yet, there is kind of a stigma attached to the jobs that are done with your hands and with your back. If you're working your butt off, I don't care what you're doing, you deserve respect.
Wow. You know, I try to say that in my speeches. You just said it a lot better than I do. You're right. And you know what? We need plumbers. And we need sheet metal workers. And we need carpenters. And we need people who can work with their hands. And there are millions of young people who, for a variety of reasons, don't want to go to college, and that's fine. They deserve good jobs, and by the way, they deserve the training they need. When I talk about making public colleges and universities tuition-free, I also mean making those trade schools tuition-free so those young people can get the training that they need to do those skilled jobs and make a good living. But your point is well taken. I mean, this is... We need, I don't know, I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I don't know what work in America is more important than being a teacher, all right? Teachers, in the course of their lifetime, will educate hundreds, if not thousands, of young people and make them productive, help make them productive citizens. We need to honor that work. That is an extremely important work. And while your daughter may not complain, in my view, in many parts of this country, teachers are underpaid, all right? And we have an education program that will move us to the day, sooner than later, when no teacher in America makes less than $60,000 a year. And I want the young people to understand that teaching is an honorable and important profession, and that they will not have to take what's going on right now. You got teachers, I don't know if your daughter does it, taking money out of their own pockets in order to buy school supplies. That should not be the case in America. Okay, yes, see a gentleman over there.
I want to know how you're going to do this by yourself. Being president is a big step toward that, but you are an independent. The Democratic Party sometimes doesn't even acknowledge you. So once you get elected, how the hell are we going to force the rest of these people to get in line and do what we need to be doing?
What's your name, sir?
Jim
Everhart. All right, Jim asked a great question. And Jim started it off, Jim, by how you going to do it by yourself, right? Even if I'm president, Horton. And the answer is, I'm not. That's why the message of our campaign, Jim, is us, not me. Because I'm here to tell you what you said is true. But it's not just for me. No president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it by himself or herself. Why is that? Let me throw it back to you, Jim. Why can no president, no matter how well-intentioned and honest, this is a smart guy over there. You got it. That's right. All right, so let's spend a minute on that. Let me take Jim's good question and why I say us, not me. If you look at the history of this country, what you learn is that real change never comes from the top, the president. It always comes from the bottom when millions of people demand that change. How many people we got in the room here are members of unions? Got union people here? All right. The history of the union movement is way back when incredibly brave people put their lives on the line to tell their employers they will not be treated as if they were garbage and disposable items. They stood together and they said, you know what, we have rights, we're going to form a union, we're going to engage in collective bargaining, and you are going to treat us with respect. Millions of workers stood up and made that struggle. The history of the civil rights movement in this country was not just the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was millions of African Americans and their white allies saying we are going to end segregation and racism and Jim Crowism in this country. 100 years ago, I want everybody to hear this, 100 years ago, not a long time, women in America did not have the right to vote. You think they can go out and get the education they want? Think they go out and get the jobs that they wanted? They were not. They were stereotyped. Women's place was in the home. What did they know about voting and politics? That was beyond their limited comprehension. But women stood up and said, that's nonsense. All right, we are going to be first-class citizens in America. We're not going to be second-class citizens anymore. They organized. Some of them died. Some of them went on hunger strikes. So women got the right to vote, and that struggle has continued. It continues today to make sure that women have every right that they are entitled to as human beings. All right? When we talk about gay rights, nobody in this room, including me, 30 years ago would have believed that gay marriage would be legal in every state in this country. But the gay community stood up and they fought for justice. And that's true for the environmental movement. So to answer your question, as President of the United States, I'm going to have to take on the power of Wall Street. They're a pretty powerful group of people. I'm going to have to take on the insurance companies and the drug companies and the fossil fuel industry and the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, and the whole damn 1%. Because I'm going to demand that they start paying their fair share of taxes, and they ain't going to be too happy about that. And you know what, Jim? I can't do it alone. You're exactly right. That is why what this campaign is about is called a political revolution. It's about millions of people standing up and fighting for justice. Now, when that happens, when the young people and the union people and the old people and working people all over this country tell the corporate elite, we are sick and tired of their greed and corruption. When that happens, you know what? I ain't going to do it alone. But as a nation and as a people, we'll do it together. That's what we will do. Okay, woman in the blue T-shirt.
Hi, my name is Clarissa. I'm kind of jumping on what Jim said. I mean, you speak to my soul, but I'm part of a generation and the generation before me who were raised thinking that socialism was akin to communism, which were, again, the most anti-American things you could do. I'd like to know, how are you going to counter or respond to the Trump campaign, who are going to totally blast the socialism word all over?
Good. Thank you very much, Clarissa. Good question. I'm glad you asked it. So let's talk about what democratic socialism means. what it means, and parts of it exist all over the world. I mean, I wish I was telling you that I'm so smart that I invented all of these things. I didn't. All right, I live, as I mentioned earlier, 50 miles away from Canada. In Canada, healthcare is a human right. Everybody has a card. You go to any doctor, any hospital you want to. You don't take out your wallet. Think that's communism? I don't think so. In countries all over the world, Germany, for one, how much does, let me ask Paige. Paige, you know how much it costs to go to college in Germany?
Probably not a whole lot.
No, less than a whole lot. It costs nothing. Okay. In fact, I remember I gave a speech in Washington, D.C., and I said, you know, in Scandinavia, in Germany, college is free. Finland, it's free. Some kid gets up and he says, Senator, you're wrong. It's not free. They pay us to go to college, actually. All right. Picking up on your point that they understand. We don't, in this country, one of the crazy, I'm detouring a little bit, is, I don't know about Grinnell, but if you go to community colleges, go to state universities, these kids are working 20, 30, 40 hours a week while they're trying to do their studies, which is pretty crazy. But all over the world, countries have understood that economic rights are human rights. Do you know how many, all right, somebody here, no doubt, many women here have had babies, right? You have babies, all right? We are one of the tiny, very few countries. Actually, we are the only industrial country that when you have a baby, you don't get paid parental leave. If you lived in Norway today, ma'am, and you had a baby, do you know how much time off you'd get with full pay? 10 months.
Japan.
I'm sorry, it's a year in Japan. Now, you don't see that too much on TV. You don't hear about it much in Congress. Is that a terrible idea? The idea that if you have a baby, everybody here knows that the first years of a baby's life are the most important, right? You want mom and dad to be able to bond with the baby. In America, correct me if I'm wrong here, people, please do, but there are women who give birth and a week or two later they're back in the workforce. What happens to the baby? Where does the baby go? Why is mom not with that baby? Because she has to go back and earn a living. Is that true? Okay. All right. So when we talk about what democratic socialism means to me, it means, A, having a government that works for working people, not just for wealthy corporate interests. It means guaranteeing, the basic necessities of life. Healthcare is a basic necessity of life. Education is a basic necessity of life. The right to take care of your baby when you give birth so that your baby grows up healthy and happy is a human right. The right to decent housing. Do you know that tonight we have 500,000 people in this country who are sleeping out on the street? That's what we got, including many veterans. All right? I think housing is a human right. All right? You're going to have rich and you're going to have poor. But at the end of the day, in the richest country in the history of the world, we should make sure that all of our people have at least a minimal standard of living. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I know you're right. Trump and his friends will distort everything that I say. You're right. They'll frighten people. But I think at the end of the day, when we look at the issues, issue by issue, healthcare is a right, housing is a right, decent paying jobs as a right, ending starvation wages, expanding the union movement, making sure that all of our kids, regardless of income, can get a higher education. The American people support those ideas. And we're going to beat Trump because those are the ideas that working families in this country support. All right. Okay, ma'am, right here. And I'm going to have to move on, I think, pretty soon. We got something down the road. Yeah.
Well, hi again.
Hi again. You look familiar.
And I have my notes here to help me as well. But something that I'm really passionate about is ending HIV in the United States. A medication here costs $29,000 that you can get $75 in other countries. And only
say that again. $29,000 in America?
$29,000 in America.
And $75 in other countries?
Yes, correct. And only 28% of people with HIV are receiving regular care and medication. So under Medicare for All, how can people with things like terminal illnesses and diseases like HIV receive care? And also with that, how can we work to prevent things like this?
Well, you know, very often I go to meetings like this and somebody jumps up and says, well, my daughter has a rare disease, is it covered? Medicare for all is comprehensive health care covering all illnesses. All. Last I heard, HIV is an illness. Of course it covers HIV. And of course it covers all illnesses. Okay? And again, I want to reiterate to all folks here, people say, well, you know, is Bernie really telling the truth? It sounds too good to be true. We are spending twice as much per person on health care now, and you've already heard the horror stories here today. You've told another one. We're spending twice as much as the people of any other country. So we can have comprehensive health care covering all illnesses, and certainly, if our goal is not to have a system which makes money for the drug companies and the insurance companies, and I want everybody to hear this. Give me those numbers again. $29,000 for compared to $75 abroad. Well, you know what I think? I think that's kind of criminal. What do you think? Is that criminal or not? Woman there mentioned, Kelly mentioned insulin. Some of you may know a few months ago I went to Canada to buy insulin for people who had diabetes. You know what the differential was? They pay 1/10 the price in Canada for insulin, the same product as we pay in this country. This is criminal. And by the way, the pharmaceutical industry is not only greedy, they are corrupt. They engage in collusion and in price fixing right now, as all of you know. There's a major lawsuit being waged against them by all of the states' attorneys general because the opioid producers actually knew that the product they were selling all over this country was addictive and killing people. They were making a lot of money doing that, and they continued doing that. And on drug after drug, they collude, they engage in price fixing, and they charge us, as you just heard, by far the highest prices in the world. We're going to end that. All right, I apologize. I think we've got to hit down the road here. But I wanted to thank our panelists for being here. I want to thank all of you for being here. We have two things that we have got to do in the next year. Number one, we have got to defeat the most dangerous, corrupt president in the history of this country. And secondly, we have got to bring our people together. We have to end this divisiveness, this Trump effort to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation. We come together around an agenda that speaks to the needs of working families. And all of the ideas that I've thrown out to you, whether it's health care for all, raising the minimum wage, dealing with climate change, these are the ideas that the American people support, and it's time that we implement what the American people want, not just wealthy campaign contributors. So that's what this campaign is about. And I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. Look forward to your support. Thank you very much.